Shortly after takeoff, all occupants of the aircraft lost consciousness, but the plane continued its scheduled route. Air traffic controllers became concerned about the lack of response from the pilots, and military jets were immediately scrambled to intervene. But all they saw were unconscious people, and the plane running out of fuel and crashing into the ground. This is the story of Helios Flight 522 that we will see today. On August 14, 2005, Helios Airways Flight 522 departed Larnaca, Cyprus, for Athens, Greece, on what appeared to be a routine, uneventful trip. The Boeing 737 had no history of catastrophic failure, weather conditions were favorable, and the takeoff itself was smooth. However, beneath this ordinary morning lay a chain of technical and procedural decisions that would soon align with terrifying precision. Hours before departure, engineers inspected the aircraft's pressurization system, switching the mode selector from auto to manual as part of standard maintenance. Crucially, the selector was never returned to the auto position once the work was finished. This tiny, overlooked detail, a single switch, was nearly impossible to detect without deliberate verification, setting the stage for a silent and deadly failure. When the pilots entered the cockpit, nothing appeared obviously wrong. The aircraft systems powered up, pre-flight checks were performed, the engines started without issue, and so Flight 522 departed. What no one realized was that the aircraft was now climbing without automatic cabin pressurization, meaning the higher it flew, the less oxygen would be available inside the cabin. A threat with no immediate visual warning, only subtle symptoms, only silent danger. As Flight 522 climbed through the early stages of its ascent, the cabin pressure began to drop. Gradually, quietly. Passengers didn't panic. They couldn't, because nothing dramatic happened. Instead, the effects of hypoxia crept in. Mild dizziness, confusion, a strange sense that something wasn't quite right. Inside the cockpit, warning horns began sounding. But here, the tragedy took a crucial turn. The alarm that activated was identical to another warning the pilots were trained to recognize, one associated with takeoff configuration issues. In other words, the sound did not clearly scream, pressurization failure. It created ambiguity. Believing they were facing a different problem, the pilots searched for explanations that matched their assumptions. Meanwhile, oxygen levels continued to fall. Cognitive performance degraded. Reactions slowed. Judgment weakened. The aircraft kept climbing. The emergency kept intensifying. And the crew, unknowingly, drifted deeper into hypoxia. As the Boeing 737 reached cruising altitude, the situation became irreversible. Without sufficient oxygen, the human brain cannot function properly. Thought processes collapse, coordination fails, consciousness fades. Passengers lost awareness first, then the cabin crew, and finally, inside the cockpit, the pilots themselves succumbed. The aircraft, however, remained perfectly capable of flight. Autopilot engaged, navigation systems active, engines running normally. To air traffic control, the plane continued along its programmed route. But something was terribly wrong. Radio calls went unanswered. Repeated attempts to establish contact failed. Confusion turned into alarm. And soon, military fighter jets were scrambled to intercept the unresponsive aircraft. When Greek fighter pilots approached Flight 522, they expected to find a technical malfunction, perhaps a communications failure. What they saw instead was haunting. The cockpit windows revealed motionless pilots. The cabin appeared eerily still. No visible signs of struggle, no active distress. Just an aircraft flying steadily, without conscious control. But then, something unexpected. A single figure appeared inside the cockpit. A flight attendant who had managed to remain conscious longer than the others, likely using a portable oxygen supply. He attempted to regain control. He tried to save the aircraft. But by then, Fuel levels were critically low. Moments later, the engines flamed out, and Flight 522 began its final descent. Helios Airways Flight 522 did not crash because of a dramatic mechanical failure. It fell because of a nearly invisible oversight. A pressurization selector left in manual, a warning system that created confusion instead of clarity, and the cruel reality of hypoxia, an emergency that steals awareness before victims understand what is happening. In aviation, disasters are rarely born from a single mistake. They emerge from chains, small links, minor details, tiny assumptions. Flight 522 became a chilling reminder of how silent dangers can be the most lethal of all. Because sometimes, nothing explodes, nothing breaks apart. Everything simply goes quiet.